even before we get started, right? So this was the first challenge that we saw. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out to be over here. And thank you for the introduction, Charmin, and thanks Empiric Media for having me here. So Rohit made my job fairly easy, right? He spoke about what are things that you saw in digital transformation. There was a question on what are problems that you see. So we're going to be delving a little more into that in this session. And like the previous session, I loved the energy that you guys had where you came up with questions. So feel free to stop me. Just like Rohit, I tend to speak fast too. And I'm worse because I'm a South Indian and I tend to speak at the speed of my thoughts. So if I'm going very fast, just stop me. Tell me that it's not making sense, it's flying overhead. So just stop me and we'll go on. So digital transformation, I mean, everyone's talking about it. Really? Do we do digital transformation? Do you do digital transformation? How many of you do digital transformation? How many of you do digital transformation? I saw 2 hands slowly going up over here. Okay, so a few more. So you're right, because BCG research showed, and this is post-COVID particularly, that almost every organization is talking of digital, right? Irrespective of the industry you're in, irrespective of the kind of field that you're working in, irrespective of the function you're in, it's almost impossible to imagine that today you are working without a technology backbone which is supporting you in doing your business processes, right? Any of your organizations doing things completely manually? There you go, right? You do have something which is there in terms of technology. But the question which Rohit also pointed out is saying, if you're using technology, is it really digital transformation? Is digitizing the same as digital transformation? The answer clearly is no. And Rohit made the points on saying what really was digital transformation, right? And the fun part of it is that from a McKinsey research, and BCG also has one which kind of points to the similar thing, there are hardly 30% of digital programs that succeed. So someone asked the question saying, how do I take it to the CEO? If your CEO is skeptical about putting money behind digital, don't be surprised. He's seen this research too, right? And he's saying, hey, it's not working, guys. I mean, I've seen many organizations where you've done a lot of tech, just not working. And the problem also goes a little more. So BCG research shows this. I don't know if you can read this slide, but there are 3 parts that you see in the graph. The one on the right is where you have the 30% that are winning, right? The ones that have achieved a business objective. So if you remember, Rohit pointed out and said that, when you start out a program, you need to have a business case. He started out by saying that. 30% have only met a business case. The one in the middle block, which is where you have it as a worry, is where you've had about 50% of your business case being met, 50% of your numbers that you've kind of achieved. The last one is the woe, where you've had less than 50% or nothing being achieved. Why is this so important to us? And why is it that we are really saying that if you're looking at digital transformation, why should I be considering this and what should I be doing? The question comes down to 2 things. One, why do I need to do a digital transformation, right? So what are the imperatives that are fueling digital transformation? There are a bunch of them. The first one, of course, is what we've all kind of been through and seen. You've seen that there are evolving models of working. People are working remotely. You have need for people to be doing it. Some organizations are still working hybrid. Some like us, which is part of the pharma industry, we've been working pretty much in office right through the pandemic as well, because it was necessary to kind of do it. But even there, you've seen pockets which are saying that you don't need to be doing it in a physical mode. I can do it virtually. So the first part is, of course, an evolving model of working or the way of working. I think this is one of the reasons why you see a lot more digital coming in. The second one is that you're seeing it not just being a transformation on some of the operational metrics. We spoke about value creation. The question is, what is the value you're trying to derive? Earlier, you were seeing it just for a particular function, a particular process. But what you realize is everything is interconnected today. You want to be making sure that you have not just the verticals which are being there, but you wanted to have a horizontal integration. So if you're saying that there is a change in the forecast, can it go all the way back up to my production, to the MRP planning, to the procurement? How can it go through seamlessly and kind of take it through with stuff that you're looking around? If you're looking like we are in the pharma industry, where you're saying that I need R&D products to kind of come through in a faster pace, how do I look at what is the market demand for it and take it all the way back to saying what is the competitive nature and how do I get back towards an R&D and say how quickly can I launch it? So you're looking at transformation right across the value chain. It's no longer restricted to saying it's one part that I'm doing it in. The third area that you look at is saying that I need to have a single view of data, right? It's not that my data is better than yours. Like if you recall many of the, I'm a huge history buff, so if you look at many of the wars that happened earlier, it happened because you felt that my religion was better than yours. Today that religion is translated to data, right? The sales team says, no, my data is right. Finance team's data is incorrect. The finance team says, no, my data is right. Supply chain team's data is incorrect, and so on and so forth. You want to break that. You want to have everyone looking at a single view of data, and hence digital transformation again starts picking up. And the last one, of course, is innovation. You have so many new technologies coming in. The number of acronyms that are coming up is difficult to keep pace even for tech guys like us. So think about how it is for the guys who are in the part of the business, right? You have AI, ML, blockchain, you name it, you've got those kind of things that are coming in. Many of them with very, very interesting use cases, with ChatGPT being the latest that you're probably seeing. So how do you kind of leverage the innovation to get the business benefit? Going back to what Rohit was saying, that you're looking at having a huge value to be created for the business. With these being the part, the question that really comes back is saying, what's your imperative for digital transformation? Why are you doing it? What do you want to achieve? Seems a very simple question to be looked at, but like Rohit was pointing out, perhaps the most easy ones are the most difficult to kind of get after. And the first part of your challenge starts from there, where you start looking at saying, do you have the clarity on why are we doing this? We talked of saying that we're looking at alignment being there. Digital hardly does anything on its own, right? Maybe you're doing something from a cybersec perspective, even that is from a business continuity viewpoint. I can't think of anything which I do, at least in my organization or in the last 20 years plus that I've consulted, for any organization where I do a tech for the sake of tech. You do it because there is an underlying business benefit that you're looking at, and you need to align with your business leaders on saying, why am I needing to do this? You'd be surprised with the number of cases where you feel that you're taking it up for a particular reason, business is sitting on something else completely. I don't know how many of you have seen this book which was there earlier, which said men are from Mars and women are from Venus or something like that. It is very similar in this kind of thing that you look at. You would find that the tech team is thinking of something and working through with it. The business team is thinking of something else. We spoke of agile as a way of working, but unfortunately many organizations still have a traditional waterfall method still lying around with them. You need to be able to marry that to understand what am I looking for, what do I want to kind of go towards. The second part, once you even know it, is the commitment. And everyone talks of top-down leadership alignment should be there. Oh, absolutely, you do need it. But is the leader the one who is going to use the technology that you're kind of providing? More often than not, it is not. It's the guy who's at the bottom rung. It's the person who's the mid-level. They are the guys who will first of all start going and saying, sir, ये तो बिल्कुल चल ही नहीं रहा है. Sir, पहले तो ये कर रहे थे, it was much easier to kind of do it. Now it has become a lot more difficult for me. Technology बोल के I've made, my life has become very difficult. So it's like what you see in the Mumbai metro, right? I mean, you're promising a new future, a better thing that is there, but for that interim period, there's a lot of hassle. How do you kind of manage it? How do you get people to stay committed towards it and make sure that you kind of go through is the second big challenge that you see, not just top down, but bottom up as well. The third one that you would look at is the capabilities. And more often than not, we underestimate this. So we say that when you're looking at a capability to be kind of put in for doing a transformation, you need to be having a cross-functional team that comes together. Different consultants call it different ways. Gartner calls it a composable team. You have others that call it a 2-in-a-box or 3-in-a-box kind of a model. But you need teams to come together. And you need the different capabilities to be there, whether it's the functional capability, whether it's the technical capability, whether it's cyber that you're looking at, whether it's UI, UX that you're looking to build in, whatever be the kind of capabilities, if you don't have those, you're setting yourself up for failure because you'll start and then you'll figure out something is kind of got missing. Many a time what I've noticed is people view it like it's a triangle, whereas actually it's a pyramid. And you've missed out, you've taken one view of it and you've taken one functional part of it, the other parts are just completely missing. And when you look to start putting your different systems in place and you look to integrate the different parts together, you start seeing that the wheels start coming off. So hence, you need to make sure that you've got the right kind of capabilities as well put in. And this is one which, one can never get tired of talking through, right? Perhaps the most important of the lot is what I would argue. The change management piece is perhaps one of the biggest ones that can completely derail your digital transformation efforts. A big challenge on this is kind of setting the course, aligning everyone, saying how do you need to go through this? What do you need to be looking at? What are the kind of things you need to train people on? What should they be kind of getting on towards? And then taking the step-by-step part of saying, are we going towards the part that we're looking for, or are we falling behind? What are the mitigation plans I need to put in place to kind of work through this, and how do I need to take it on? These are kind of challenges that you typically keep encountering time after time in any digital transformation initiative you undertake. And the last part is connecting the dots. We spoke of saying, how do you have a single view of the data? How do you know if your transformation initiative is working in the direction you want? If you said that I'm setting a business metric, I want to improve my forecasting accuracy. Implementing a forecasting tool or putting in a completing forecasting process is going to take you 9 months to a year. Are you going to wait till then to see if it's working or not working? What are those leading indicators that you want to look at to say that these are the kind of things which are making sense or not making sense? How do you address this challenge of saying this is an initiative that will work, this is an initiative that will not work? I'll take a pause over here. If you have any questions on the kind of challenges or any observations, anything that you have seen from your organizations, happy to discuss that before I move towards how do we overcome the obstacles. Does this make sense to you guys? Is this stuff that you've seen as part of the things that you've done in your change management journeys, in your digital transformation journeys? Anything else that you've observed? Yes, please.
Thank you, Ganesh, for insightful session. Being working in an organization, I've seen a lot of times the business people have a lot of questions in their mind, and most of the time the delivery of these questions means requirement of building a BRD, then getting into the prioritization, budget approval and all. How we as a tech people can allow the business people to ask more and more questions, but not going to this friction of entire process, which actually restrict them to ask more questions.
Great point. I will just come to it when I come to overcoming the obstacles. And this is exactly what you look at. So in my mind, I think post-COVID, the biggest change that has happened really, if you were to ask me, is I don't think there is a separate tech and a business team any longer.
Right.
I think the boundaries are blurred.
Right.
The tech guy needs to understand as much of the business as much as the business guy needs to understand tech. And the only way you do it is by having a cross-functional team. I'll talk a little bit more about it when I get to overcoming the obstacles, but bang on, sir. If you don't have the part of saying that, how do you really get this together and how do you get the teams to come together, it always fails. And the challenge also starts when you come to the bottom, right? Because I don't know about you, many of the organizations I have seen, especially traditional organizations, right, which aren't used to much of IT, or like Rohit said, we are a pharma company where we have about 12,000 field forces spread across the country. Right, and not very tech savvy in that sense. Anything that they see which has a word digital, system, technology, IT ko pucho, right? That's always the kind of case that kind of gets into. How do you get them to kind of work along? How do you kind of go through together on this? And how do you make sure that the finger pointing doesn't happen for something that doesn't work when you see a challenge is the thing that you need to look at. And for that, again, we'll talk about it when we come to overcoming challenges, but absolutely, bang on, it's a very important point and you need to consider it.
Industry, you are in there of compliances, right?
Yep.
In pharma. So definitely as a CIO, you need to take a trade-off between the digitalization and the legacy way of doing the compliances management, which are definitely the core. So at that time, what kind of decision making or thought process you put in mind to?
Great point. Great point. And it's not, I'll just extend your question a little further. It's not just about compliance. Many a times cyber as well comes in as part of the concerns, right? So for instance, if you're looking at IT/OT integrations, there are many times that people say, oh, you have a lot of things that could come in as a vulnerability from these sensors. So should we even be going on the IT/OT path now, right? So when you're looking at it, I think the first part is where you sit together and understand what are you trying to solve for, right? And many a time, it's not necessary that what you're doing as your first solution is necessarily your best one. Again, what I would also kind of counsel is what I've noticed is it's not necessary that a best practice that has worked for a peer of yours is also going to work in your context, because you have a different cultural context, you have a different kind of a maturity level. You need to be looking at saying that what is it I'm trying to solve for, and then kind of add on the constraints on top of it and say, how do I work around these constraints? The good news from a pharma perspective is if you look at many of our regulators, even places like the US FDA, they have moved a lot on the digital side. So including the audits that was happening during the COVID period was conducted virtually, right? They were picking all the information virtually, they're taking it from the systems directly, and they were happier when they saw it from there because then it gave them a comfort that you had the entire thing being done. It was a rigor being followed rather than a manual record which was being maintained earlier. Some of my peers still do it. But I think it's always better when you have a system where you can track, you can trace, you can maintain audit trails. So all of those coming in actually helps compliance. So many of times the regulators are happy to kind of take it on. The challenge that I still see when you kind of go on to it is in some cases, some of the systems don't talk to one another. Interoperability becomes a problem. And there when you have the things kind of coming on, you have a manual part and then you kind of upload it back into another system because the formats are not there or someone is massaging and pushing it back in, that's where your problems typically start. So that's my view as far as what I see in the compliance parts being there. I think it's much lesser of a problem than what it was earlier because people realize that it does make a lot of sense to kind of get onto it. But again, I think the only mantra for it is where you collaborate and kind of take it through. We'll talk more about it when I come to overcoming challenges. Thank you.
How about your feeling on fear of failing?
On fear of?
Failing.
Oh, totally. It's always then, which is where, you need to have a strong project governance. Again, when I come to the overcoming obstacles, we talk of it. But these last 2 points are essentially that. It is to make sure that you don't fail. And again, if you've not seen the BC results, a public document, you could see it. You'd find that they call out that those who cover, and they've got a different set of ones that are there. The gist is probably what I've got away from my experience. But they claim that by doing that, 80% of the organizations have a chance of success. Moving from 30%, so obviously it's...
Sir, as a pharma, you know that there is lots of legacy system running on the R&D and the plant sites.
Yep.
And for the CEO and MD sites, they are ready to go for the digital transformation.
Yep.
So how do you know that as a technology part, this coming to this gap, overcoming to this gap, it takes decades to cover this vulnerability and the legacy system. How do you plan to come out of these challenges and what can be the roadmap for this?
So great point. So your question is if you have legacy systems and it takes a long while to kind of make that transition, how do you really go about it? Did I get that right? That's really what you're looking at? So again, in my case, I'm fairly lucky in that sense. When I got in here at Alchem 4 years ago, I insisted that I need to report into the CEO. So I have a seat at the table. Right? So that definitely helps because you're talking with your peers, you're kind of understanding what needs to go on, you're able to kind of get that common view across. Second, I think when you're looking at taking on a thing like this, the initial part is just talking through and trying to figure out as much as you can, saying what are you likely to be encountering, right? So if you're looking at, and it's not just from a business viewpoint alone that you look at it. When you talk of it, and I think Rohit made that point very nicely when he said you first look at the as-is. So when you look at the as-is, you cover not just your business processes, you also cover your tech landscape. Where are you currently? How much of a jump it is? And what you start taking on is you start taking on smaller bites because you don't want to take on a long program which is going to take a year or a couple of years to kind of go through and people start losing interest in it. You want to show quick wins. You want to show wins that people can see where you have them as champions who will fuel further transformation to kind of take on. Again, I think we'll talk more about it when we come to the overcoming part, but bang on, sir. It is one where it's part of your change process where you need to kind of work through it and figure out what are things that you face as challenges. In some cases, to come to your point very specifically, we've replaced legacy systems, right? We've gone on saying that this just doesn't work. Some of them were on Windows 7 and could not be upgraded to a Windows 10, and clearly you have vulnerabilities over there. You can't stick with those, you just move on. Okay, great. So I'm going to move on in the interest of time and talk about how do you overcome the challenges. The first is we spoke of clarity as a challenge, right? We said that people don't have clarity on what you're doing, why you're doing it. So the first part is set the expectations clearly, align with business. If I take examples from both my consulting days and where I currently work with a pharma major, people want to start AI/ML from a quarter down the line. We know it doesn't happen, right? You need to get your historical data and you need to build a model, train a model, and then get to AI/ML. There is a stepwise process you need to get for it. Educating the business teams on what is possible, and again, going back to what we spoke a little earlier, saying that business needs to understand tech, tech needs to understand business, becomes absolutely imperative. Making sure that you have a fair alignment on what you need to do is perhaps the first step on what you kind of take on when you're looking to build out clarity. So if someone says, I want an AI model in 6 months down the line, you're not going to get one, sorry. It's going to take you a year to 2 years for it to kind of come through. I need to build my base data sets. I need to kind of train the model, and only then can I get towards it, right? So working along and figuring out what is possible, what is not, is I think the first step of where you set clarity. The second part is also in saying that, why are we doing this? What do we need to do to get there? How will we do it? Who will do it? The biggest challenge that you see is you have people who kind of are already doing a day job, and you're putting them into a project which requires full-time commitment. And then you run around the people just to even schedule a meeting, right? It becomes extremely challenging. Your project starts falling behind. You don't have that kind of push coming through. Getting that as part of it and making it very clear that for doing these are the requirements that I need to have. These are underlying foundations I need to build. And for making success, this is what we require, is one of the first things you need as you're kind of looking to take on clarity. The second part is commitment. We spoke about this as saying both top down and bottom up. So we covered this when we kind of spoke about it earlier. What you're looking at is saying that you have leadership alignment. You get the leaders to kind of sit in, have those weekly meetings or stand-up meetings that you do with your functional teams, the way that you do it along with your project team in terms of a garage meeting or a scrum meeting that you do, whichever way you're operating it. But you also look for saying that in those weekly meetings, can I put up what are risks that I'm seeing? Can I see what kind of leadership decisions do I need for kind of either changing course or kind of correcting course? That's what you'd look at when you go on the leadership alignment parts and work both with the top down and bottom up. You also look at getting onto the field and working along with who are the people you're doing this project with. Who are the operational guys? Can you co-opt them as part of your team? Can you sit along and actually see if you've provided a training manual, you've given them training, you think this is the way it should operate, but when you actually get towards it, you'll find it's completely different. The guy is saying, sir, ye chal nahi raha mera, I've got these kind of problems. How do you kind of work with and clarify it is what you'd look at when you look to take commitment and course correct as you're going along. And the point which I have on committing to resolve it jointly is one which I can't emphasize enough. You probably have enough and more where you look at saying that, how do I take through a commitment which is there both from the business side and from the tech side to be able to solve a problem jointly? Because we are one team that is working for the benefit of the organization. It sounds very simple, but it's perhaps the most difficult thing that I've seen when you kind of take it on, because you always want to point fingers when you are saying that why is something not happening the way it should, and getting people to have a joint accountability is perhaps something that you need to look at when you're taking this on. The capabilities part, right? I mean, we call out the skills that are required. You find many a time that you don't have the skills available with you. You've got a new technology that you're kind of operating, and perhaps you're trying to put on a blockchain. You don't have the skills in-house. What are you going to do about it? Do you work with a startup? Do you work with a consultant? How do you kind of bring it to the fore, and how do you build this across? You need to identify this very, very early. Otherwise, what you're going to be looking at is you'll come up with a scenario where you'll have the project which is in flight, and you'll suddenly come up with a step saying, I've got this place over here, I'm not able to integrate the parts together here, or I've got a challenge where I don't know what to do with this tech piece that has come in. How do I solve for it? This is where you need to have the capabilities kind of coming through. And we already spoke about the cross-functional team. So to your points earlier, which you were raising, both of you, on what are the kind of things that you see on getting the cross-functional things to come together, whether it's compliance, whether it is the kind of things that you look at, get all those concerned stakeholders as part of your team that is going to work on getting this to go through. The last thing you want is to come up with everything and then be told, oh sorry, security part has not been considered, we will not be able to go for it, or a compliance has been missed out, we can't go for it. Make sure that you have all of this baked in as you even start your engagement, and then take it right through where the team is involved from start to finish. Change is one which I think is the biggest one that we typically see, where you typically would find that collaboration, communication, we undervalue the communication parts. It's important to kind of celebrate the small wins, important to call out what are things that are working well, also call out what didn't work well, what are lessons we learned, so you don't kind of repeat those same mistakes again. Getting along with the project management part, aligning people, and it's not just the top that you're aligning here. You need to align the people who are the operational level guys as well, and tell them that this is what it didn't work, this is how we're going to take care of it. So it's a temporary part that you're currently seeing a challenge on, we will fix this. We hear you. Many a time just getting them to realize that you are working for their benefit, that what's in it for them is really seen clearly, and they know that it is something that's going to help them, will resolve a lot of your problems as you're kind of going on, reduce the noise that people are saying that this is a program which is not really helping us, it is making our life more difficult. You don't want to have that kind of a scenario, and hence having those frequent kind of conversations, getting to talk to different people, building champions within the user groups who are going to go out and say that, hey, I've done this, it works, you can also try it, is extremely important. The cultural issues as well is something that is always coming across to the fore, right? What we have observed is when you take the cultural challenges of what you're trying to go with, you will always encounter this kind of a challenge. For instance, when we launched a program for doctors to connect with their patients during the start of the pandemic. This was in March 2020 that we talked to about 2,000 doctors, figured that they needed to have a solution for engaging their patients. And we came up with initially what was a teleconsulting platform. But what we realized very quickly was it's not about teleconsulting. If the pandemic goes, doctors and patients still prefer to come to the clinic. So it got extended to saying that it's an in-clinic management platform as well. It can build a EHR. I can start providing content to the patients that the doctor can nudge and give it across. All of it with the entire framework of privacy, the way in which you have the teleconsult guidelines, all of those falling well in place. So what you need to look at is also make sure that you take care of the kind of cultural challenges. Don't hammer your head against a wall where you know you're not going to succeed. You can keep telling people the benefits of teleconsult, but if they're more comfortable in a face-to-face kind of an interaction, it's a losing battle you're fighting, and it's been proven globally that beyond a point, doctors are more comfortable seeing a patient in the clinic for multiple reasons. The course correction is one that you again need to look at. Think of what obstacles you're likely to be facing. If you can start building it's similar to what you do in a security scenario, right? You build a risk register and you build your risk mitigation plans against it. Very similar to the kind of things you look at when you take on a digital transformation exercise. Look at what are possible things that you could be kind of encountering, what are the possible solutions that you can possibly get for it, and figure out what works. Why is this important? Because as you kind of undertake more and more kind of engagements on the digital side, you can go back and start looking at a repository and saying what works in which context and which doesn't, right? So this is very, very helpful for you to kind of go through, rather than because you have different teams that are working on it, you'd be able to provide the teams a consolidated view of saying this is what can work, this is what we need to be doing. And lastly, connecting the dots. Have common goals for the teams that are working on this. It's not saying that the business team will look at this, the IT team will look at this. The project team has a common goal to make the transformation succeed. That is the brief. You cannot have different people looking at different things. You need to have within those, of course, there are roles assigned as part of your AC, but the overall goal for the project team is one, make the project succeed. Make your digital transformation succeed. Whatever it takes to do that, leadership provides a commitment for it. You, along with the functional leads, need to be kind of working along to make sure that happens, along with CEO or along with all the other operational teams working along. And lastly, the biggest one that is there, you have silos. Whatever you kind of try doing, whatever you kind of go with, as humans, we love to have our silos, we love to have our fiefdoms. See how much you can break it across, see how much you can kind of engage, get people to kind of feel good about doing this, where it is aligned towards what the top is. So where you need to motivate people, where you need to connect dots and say that this is how I need to kind of encourage and take people along, those are kind of things that you look at when you go on with this. I know I'm pretty much busted with my time, but thank you so much for this. Looking forward to seeing each of us move up the digital evolution chain. And if you'd like to connect, this is my coordinates on LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect over there. Thank you once again for your time. If there are any questions, I'd love to take them.
Can we have a bigger round of applause, please? Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I see a hand up right behind over there. I guess you'd be loud enough, sir. Just scream it out.
We want to talk about all these challenges. What are the CIO tools which you are using or which you would recommend in this kind of scenario?
Honestly, if you ask me, sir, while you have multiple tools that you could use, I think the simplest one is just communicate, communicate, communicate. Talk to people, build your networks. I can't emphasize the amount of relationship building that you need to take. There are multiple tools you can use, whether it's for project management, for tracking, for analytics, multiple tools you can use. But I think the underlying part of just that human relationship that you strike with each of your peers becomes absolutely important, because without it, you can have the best of tools, but none of the others will work, sir. So to my mind, I would really believe that communicating, engaging, forming that relationship that you get, where you're looking to say that we are working together to solve this problem that the organization has, and we are joined at the hip together. You may not like my face outside this meeting, that's fine. But in this meeting we are together, we need to kind of work along together on it, is what you need to look at. And that's the way I believe that the culture changes. Yes, please.
think you spoke really well, Ganesh.
Thank you.
Those slides about the cause and the challenges
Yep.
for the digital transformation. I wanted to ask very quick question from you that
Please.
you can answer. Since you are a leader into pharma organizations, talking about the digital transformation in the pharma industry, maybe let's say if you need to foresee that one or two digital transformation trends for the next 4-5 years, specific to pharma, maybe what other pharma companies should focus on in the next 4, because you mentioned, right, the blockchains are there, ChatGPT, AI, ML.
Yep.
What do you think specific 1 to 3 digital transformation trends the pharma companies should focus in next 3, 4, 5 years?
So I will couch it with the standard part, which is it depends. And the reason I say that is it depends on your maturity level and what you are doing. So if I were to take the leaders, which is the top 5, top 10 organizations, I think all of us typically are looking at 3 things, if you will. One is on the entire front office. What I mean by that is there's been a very traditional way of engaging with doctors. Reps go to the doctor's clinic, meet with doctors. How can I enable the rep to be more productive? You currently have a way by which I can profile doctors. I can get things without impinging on the doctor's privacy, right? I mean, that's the critical part over there. So the front office is a big one where we are looking at saying, how do I engage with and build relationship with doctors a lot better, thereby helping the sales teams to be more productive. More enterprise over there, kind of taking on analytics, a whole bunch of things that you can put together, right? Along with it is also patient engagement. I don't think pharma companies have done enough over there. Some have, many have not. So the second is patient engagement, because unlike the developed markets, India has still not really got there, but it's slowly getting there. In the developed markets, you see that patients are a lot more involved in the kind of care that they get. It's a lot more conversational in terms of the way they take it, unlike in India where if the doctor tells you, you typically take it at face value. The second area is the entire supply chain and distribution parts. I think that's a big one where we are all trying to solve for and trying to reduce the cost that you take to kind of get it across and what you need to go there. And the third one, which is very, very big, is Indian pharma has largely been operating on affordability and availability as the big areas. So if you look at global markets, we look at saying if a product goes off patent, how do I kind of take it on, do a R&D and give it in. Very little of original research that you're doing, but that's changing rapidly. You're seeing a lot more of biosimilars, cell gene therapy, things like that which are coming along. So a lot more use of technology, AI, ML, to identify which is the right drug for drug discovery, for improving the process of clinical trials, for reducing the time it takes from the time you identify till the time you launch. I think these are 3 areas which, to my mind, I think that the bigger ones are looking at. For many of the smaller ones, I think it's just about getting a lot more digitization in place. I think that's the first step really, where you have data which is coming into a digital form from an analog form, and then you'll start looking to have a blueprint saying that how do you kind of get these different data sources to come together. So perhaps it's an easier opportunity for them because, like someone was asking over there's no legacy, right? It's a lot easier when you're starting a completely greenfield kind of a scenario rather than when you have something and you kind of need to kind of tweak it up. I hope that made sense.
Thank you so much.
One last question. One question.
Hi. Hello.
Yeah.
So you said you are primarily a pharma organization, right? But you took an initiative of creating a platform for connecting with the doctors. What was the motivation behind it?
So it was fairly straightforward, right? I mean, March 2020, if I just rewind back, we were sitting together with the leadership team saying, and it was not even lockdown yet. We were talking in the first week of March saying, hey, we're seeing lockdown, what do we need to do? How do we enable our employees? And the big question came saying, when I'm talking of enabling employees, my field team, which is the biggest chunk of employees that we've got, how do they go across and meet doctors? They can't, right? So, and it is not just Alkem, I think all the leading pharma players kind of thought about what should we be looking at it. And there were multiple things that were done. So there were one which said that, okay, we can do a Zoom Connect or a Teams Connect or whatever platform you have to connect with doctors. And obviously doctors said, hey, I'm trying to save lives of patients and here you are trying to talk about your product to me. So that died very, very quickly. The second part was saying, let's call them for webinars. Again, doctors said, we've got our hands full and why are you coming and giving us things which is not the priority now, Rome is burning. So let's not play the fiddle. So what we did was we went to about 2,000 doctors. Towards the 3rd week of May, we went and spoke to about 2,000 of our doctors and said, doctor, what would you like from a pharma company like us? And what should have been obvious to us is what we picked up, which is that doctors said, I'm very worried about my patients. I don't know how they are, especially the chronic ones. They earlier used to come to my clinic, now they can't because of lockdown. I can't access my clinic. So I need to know how they are. And can you help us with a platform to help me engage my patients? So that's how the whole thing started out. It started out with what we typically do, in any good, part where you just understand your customer and what they are looking for. That's exactly what we did. And that led to one led to another, and we just came up with a thing where we moved into an agile dev and kind of got across a product in.
How this fits primarily in your
Core scheme of things.
Oh, that's a good one. So, have you been to any doctor's clinic, sir? Hopefully not necessary for a long time, but have you been to any doctor's clinic ever? What have you seen over there? You see a lot of patients. You'll see an equal number of medical reps as well hanging around. You've noticed that? And pharma is a very fragmented industry, so you'll see about 15-20 med reps hanging around any good doctor. How much time do you think the med rep gets with the doctor? Less than a minute. He goes and doctor says, you're from this company, I know you. Yeah, go. Even before you show your stuff, you're out. It's like what that circuit says in that Munna Bhai movie, no? Arey, andar jate hi room khatam ho gayi. It's like that. Even before you walk in, you're thrown out, right? So the whole point of this is how do you build conversation starters, right? And what is the kind of thing that you can do? Because now you're no longer talking of your product. You're looking at saying, how do I be vested in the doctor's business? How do I be vested, which is the primary part of it, which is patient outcomes and patient care? What do you really provide on that? I think that's what we're trying to move towards. We're still some way to go towards it. I think we are fairly early in terms of the way we took the initiative. But just seeing the way the thing has gone on and the number of people we've got, both in terms of being on the platform and doctors who are kind of coming on, hospitals who are signing on to it, it's quite something that we are seeing as one that works and kind of takes it on. Otherwise, Alkem has no remunerative part. We just charge a transaction fee like a Book My Show charges from the patient. That's it. If there are no other questions, I think I've run out of time. Before Shamin throws me out, I will kind of move on. But thank you again for being such a patient audience. Sorry, one last question, sir, if you don't mind. Yeah, thanks.
So, basically both you and Rohit spoke about, integrating things horizontally and taking the entire thing to transform, digital transformation to be done. Is this possible for an organization of middle size, okay, to take entire thing, one move?
Yeah.
One. Second question is like pertaining to pharma industry or any other distribution industry. What so far you have spoken is collaborating with internal collaboration. I am talking about the external collaboration.
Yes.
As well, where we are collaborating with the doctors.
Yep.
But doctor collaboration is one, but the second collaboration, which is very critical for any industry, is the distributors.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How do we convert? We may convert the best of the industry digitally, but if your partner is not, kind of in the same wavelength or same frequency, then finally the product doesn't reach to the customer.
Totally.
Right. So
Totally.
how do we address that?
Totally. Great points, both. So I'll take the question that you asked on saying that, one, how do you work with external partners, not just doctors, but others as well? We do. And I think across all the large players, you'll see there's a lot of work that is going on. Unlike CPG, though, pharma doesn't have a way by which we have a distributor management system, right? Because a distributor handles multiple pharma organizations, so they would be unwilling, the bigger ones particularly, to kind of use your exclusive system. So what you end up with is looking at saying, how do I give other things that will help the distributor? For instance, before pandemic, at least in my organization, there was a lot of, the salesperson used to go across over there, pick the order up and come back. Towards, even before pandemic hit, we launched an ordering portal for the stockists, where they could place it at their convenience. That has, we now have, I think, about 65% of our orders coming through that, right? Pharma is still a push-based sale in some cases, so to that extent, you do have some of the parts where people go and push some of the parts. Second is, it's not just about even stockists, it's about suppliers, it's about your contract research manufacturers. I think pretty much all of them got exposed to the systems that you work on, right? So those are ones which are now norm in terms of the way you look at it. And hence, all the more important, because you don't want to have a system which you're kind of taking on, where you find that things kind of fall apart when the person is doing a transaction on our end. right? And you need all those basic things, right? You need credit checks to be there. You need to have, if it's a supply rating to be available, supplier analytics to be available, your ASNs to be provided, all those good parts that you need to look. Similarly, if you're looking at research organizations, the confidentiality of how you're transferring it. All those, I think, are basic requirements which now most organizations have as systems. So you're fairly well covered there. So absolutely to your point, it is not just within your organization, it extends now beyond and goes into your third parties and your other partners who are extended parts of the organization. Makes it a lot more challenging from a cyber front, but that's reality today. The first part to your question was saying that for a mid-sized organization, how do you really start on? Where do you go with? I think again, the same thing I was telling this gentleman here, it depends. It depends on your appetite. How much are you willing to bet on this as a part of what you want to do in the future? So in many of the cases, what I see of late is now this is no longer a discussion amongst the internal team. It's a discussion at the board level because you're looking at this as a board initiative and you're calling it out. Many of the annual reports, if you were to see it, calls it out as an initiative saying that we are looking to take this on because we see this as a long-term benefit. Some of the initiatives you may not see immediate short-term ROIs, right? It's a longer-term one you're looking at. So for instance, if you're looking at cyber, you really can't say it's like insurance, right? I mean, you need to take it. If you don't have it, you're running a risk. Or if you're looking at data architectures to be put in place, you don't see an immediate benefit, but you need to have it because it's part of what you require. So working through with what you have as a digital roadmap, going along to saying that what is the value it will deliver for now and for later, what is it that you're looking at where you are and where your competitors are and where you're falling behind, especially if you're a mid-sized organization, is I think what you need to kind of put up. And it's not an easy journey to go on, sir, for sure. It's one where you need to kind of traverse it. In my own case where I came in over here, I came in where there was very limited kind of a digital view of what we were looking at. That's what I was gotten for about 4 years ago. What we've kind of worked on is started showing small quick wins, use that to leverage saying that now we've got these basic parts covered, let's go to higher order levels. So that's the way I think you would kind of take it, where you build your own credibility first, otherwise you'll constantly keep hearing saying, ये आप बड़ी बड़ी बात कर रहे हो, मेरा लैपटॉप ही चल नहीं रहा है, मेरा नेटवर्क चल नहीं रहा है, why are you talking of all these higher order things?
I agree with that. What I meant actually is the commitment from the top only. Basically, what happens as all of you go through it and you say, it is a joint exercise.
Absolutely.
So even if you set your credibility and all that stuff, there are a lot of resources in terms of
Totally.
Finance and
Totally.
resources like
Totally. And which is where I was saying, so you take it at the board level because you get the blessing from there to drive it through. And once it gets reviewed at the board level as well, more or less you'll start seeing things falling in place. But again, it's not an easy answer. It depends on the kind of culture you are at, what is the level you're willing to kind of invest. So no direct answers there. I wish I had a silver bullet to give you. Unfortunately, there isn't, sir. Thank you once again, everyone, for your time and for your patience. Have a lovely day ahead.